Hello there, so I'm going to take you just a little bit behind the scenes today. I'm just doing some things I would do to prepare for a film. So off we go. So today I'm going to share with you about my journey with plant medicines, and it began when I was a baby, and I used to be put in the pram under the plum tree in the plum orchard, because that's where my life began, living with my parents in a caravan in the plum orchard. And the first thing that's going to happen when I say those words is people are going to think, plums? Well, that's not psychoactive. What's that got to do with plant medicine? So here I am, slaughtering the first sacred cow. The rational mind has got all sorts of opinions and judgments about how things are. And you'll see as we go on with this film that that's one of my implicit intentions, is to bust open a few belief systems. So, as a baby, under the plum tree, what happened for me is that I formed this incredibly deep bond, because as a baby I was very much open to all that is, and for me that plum tree had a spirit, and it was a very playful spirit, very mischievous. And I need to borrow a little memory from my mother here, because she remembers watching me in the pram, and when it was that time of year that plums were ripe, one would drop on my head and I would burst out laughing. I just thought it was the most hilarious thing of all, that this plum just dropped on my head and went blump, and I just went, yay, that's so hilarious. And so that really is my very first experience with a plant medicine, because the spirit of the plum tree is very generous, very giving, and also pretty mischievous. And that really was a very big part of my initial experience as a soul coming into human form, was to be actually far more connected with the plants than I was with my fellow humans. So that's the first one. I'm going to fast forward a long way up to just over 18 years, and I experienced all the conditioning that we all do experience, any of us who go to school and have parents and caregivers and experience human interactions. So I was at university. Here I am at university, and I'm 18 and something or other, and I meet Viv, and I fall in love with Viv, and I like her so much. And I'm listening into a random conversation with a few of the guys where they were saying, "Ooh, let's turn Viv on, that would be a really cool thing to do, let's turn her on." And I knew what they were talking about. They were talking about cannabis. And I was very fearful for Viv, because I thought, these guys, they've got malevolent intentions, they want to do something to her, it's not right. And so I spoke to her about it, and I warned her. She didn't laugh at me. It would have been appropriate if she had done, but she did say that she was perfectly capable of looking after herself, and of course she was quite right too. But at that point in my journey with plant medicines, I developed a really unhealthy fear of anything that the mainstream media had decided to demonize, So that was my first experience of what I now refer to as the green medicine. Being frightened on behalf of another human being and wanting to protect them. And what actually happened is I had a gradual education which took place over about 4 months at university, and I kept on being around people that worked with the green medicine, and they were mostly working with what's called hashish, and all the terrible things I thought were going to happen to people who did these things, well, none of these things were happening. And more to the point, they seemed to be experiencing a level of community, a level of connection between each other, which seemed rather enviable. And so finally I reached the point where I felt like this is it. This thing I've been demonizing and frightened of, it doesn't seem so bad. It seems okay, really. So maybe I'll give it a go. And I was still in so much fear at that time that I got together with a friend and we literally put 50p in each, and we bought ourselves an amount, a tiny amount, for £1. And whenever I wasn't working with this plant medicine, I used to unscrew the switch, the light switch in the wall of the students' room where I was staying, stash it there and screw it back up, just in case, because you never know, because I was living in such a degree of fear at that time. And I had some experiences, and they were the beginning of my deconditioning from the mind control from the mainstream. And it is indeed entirely due to that plant that I was able to literally recover a sense of who I am and a sense of what's going on. And so all the propaganda, all the lies that I've been fed with throughout my childhood, they just, like the sacred cows, they just went boom, 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 boom. They just exploded into nothing. And I began to realize this is a very powerful plant spirit. And this is actually helping me. First of all, in my education. And then it was later on that I learned that it is actually also a very powerful medicinal plant, very helpful for healing. So now I'm going to whiz forward some more years, 25. And I'm living in London. And indeed, at that particular time, people do come to me for assistance with the green medicine. However, what I want to speak about is nothing to do with that. It's to do with the spirit of the mushrooms. So I'd encountered the mushrooms. I had a couple of experiences. This was my third experience with the mushrooms. And I was living in a flat, ground floor, so I've got this huge door window. It's always open all times of the year at that point in my life. So I'd always had instant connection to the outside. I just wander in to the flat, back out to my little garden. And at the end of the garden there was a high wall and there was barbed wire, but right in the corner I could get over there and I could actually go over into a piece of wild nature which had been forgotten about because they built houses all around in a circle. So it was a wonderful piece of wild nature. So I had been there a number of times, enjoyed going there. So at this particular point I'd been into wild nature, I'd come back and the mushrooms, I could feel them, I could feel the surging sensations in my body, I could feel that something significant was happening. And I had a ballpoint pen and a stack of cards in front of me, part of my daily life at that particular point. And what happened is that the mushrooms presented me with a thought. And that thought repeated and repeated. And I thought, well, I've got a card, I'll just pick up a card. And I just wrote down the thought. And as soon as I'd written the thought down, another one would come. And another, and another. And 95 cards later, I had a prescription from the mushrooms about how to live. And one of the things they're really keen on is that people need to rise up like the mushrooms and not be imprisoned in the chains of delusions and illusions. And this is really the biggest awakening that I would say is the aggregate of all my plant medicine experiences is this understanding that what we need to do is to awaken out of the prison of our delusions and illusions. So I would say that people experience mind control through upbringing, what people call education, what I would call the mainstream media. All these things, they condition people into a whole set of beliefs which then become very rigid and stuck. So plant medicines, they do the opposite. They literally, and in my case very gently over time, each rigid belief system would start to wobble a bit, and then one day it would just kind of like dissolve. But the experience with the mushrooms was definitely a big one, where I had a whole load of new insights, and it was about understanding that we need to be free, we need to be connected, we are social beings, and we need to touch each other, we need to exchange microbes as part of the process of diversification of our microbiome. I've made a number of films about that subject. If you're interested, that's something you can look up for sure. But that was a big wake up. And then I want to scroll forwards much further, all the way to 2001, exactly 20 years ago this year. So 20 years ago this year, my son and I and my best friend Ian, we got together, the three of us, in Ian's caravan on Ian's 1 hectare of land. And my son was the master of ceremonies. To use a technical term, he was the maestro. He did the research, he obtained the ingredients, he prepared the ingredients with a little bit of help from me, and he was the one that conducted the ceremony. And in that ceremony I had a purge through the mouth, which is common but not universal. I'm working with what we call the brown medicine, which other people call ayahuasca, that particular combination of two plants which together make up this magic synergy. So there it was, 20 years ago, having that experience, and I had the purge through the mouth, and I felt so much better immediately after that. We've done a lot of work with breath work, with visualization. We've done some really good stuff. Hats off to my son for a superb job of being the retreat host. He just jumped right into it. And it was after the purge, and I was just quietly sitting on my own in the part of the caravan, and it suddenly came to me, and it was like someone, a spirit, a being, just whispered in my ear, and it said, "You do realize that with me you can reprogram your DNA, don't you?" At the end of the sentence was like a little question mark, "Don't you?" And that was the sum total of all the communications I received from that particular, my first experience with the brown medicine. So little information, it was condensed into one sentence, and yet the power and the significance of that was to echo through my life and completely transform so many things, including DNA work being part of the universal soul retrieval that has been offered to people since 2008. I had no idea that 7 years later it would become an integral part of the healing I've been offering people ever since. Then I'm going to fast forward again all the way to 2006. At this point I spent 2 years studying to be a shamanic practitioner with our teacher Howard. Blessings to Howard. And at the end of the 2 years he gave us all the opportunity, if we wished, we could come on a retreat with him and work with a brown medicine. And perhaps unsurprisingly, I seem to remember everyone said yes, of course, and we all did. And it was in that particular retreat with the brown medicine that I had my first really extraordinary experience, because purging through the mouth is not for everyone, and there are many other ways to purge, which includes crying, laughing, groaning, shaking, trembling, and so many more. So many ways you can purge. But what happened to me on that particular ceremony is I felt two little holes opening up in the back of my neck, and I felt the need to move my head forward until my forehead was touching the ground in that position, which is the Muslim position of surrender. The devotee is in the surrender pose. I'll just demonstrate. It's that. So in the pose of surrender, these little holes opened up in the back of my neck, and all this toxicity poured out and out and out, and it went on for quite some time. And that perhaps is the biggest purge I ever had in my life. And it was energetic, because actually everything really is energy. It doesn't need to be a physical purge to be effective. So that's what happened to me. And then the other thing that happened to me on that particular retreat with the brown plant medicine is I was taken to a location, and I was a child, somewhere between age 10 and 11, and I was inside these underground tunnels, and there were these tiles on the walls. I can still remember in such detail, and when this always happens to me, whenever I begin to talk about this, the reality of being in a tunnel as being a child, and everything I'm about to say is more real than me sitting here speaking to you, because it's one of these seminal moments. So I'm on a slab, I'm restrained on the slab, there are beings surrounding me, and I'm about to be impaled by a long metal object. And what the plant medicine was showing me, and here's the important thing to realize, if I'd had that memory come up in a different context, I could have been terrified out of my mind, couldn't I? But because I was enfolded and embraced by the spirits of the plants, and because I'd learned to trust, this is one of my great gifts in life. My extensive experiences earlier on with the green medicine enabled me to, and also let's remember the plum tree, plant spirit, these had given me the understanding of who to trust. And ultimately and primarily, I would favour plants over humans when it comes to trusting. It's a safer bet. That's just my personal experience. So in that experience, I was in the place of total trust. So there was no fear whatsoever. I was observing. It was like watching a film, but it was happening to me at the same time. I was in two places at the same time. This is hard for anyone who's not a shamanic practitioner to grasp, but I am literally in two places at the same time. I am witnessing the experience, and I'm immersed in the experience. And the message that I was given by the spirits at that point is these words: this is where you live. You are always here. You are always here. And you can imagine, in my integration afterwards, a year later, I was still struggling to really grasp what all that was about, but I did finally grasp. But there's one more thing I have to say. The spirit of the brown medicine did inform me on that same retreat where these two amazing things happened. So the opening of the back of the head, the purge, the showing me where I live all the time. Get your head around that, dude. And the third thing is, you're going to be working with us. We're going to be working with you. You're going to be hosting retreats. That's what I was told in 2006. 2 years later, that came to pass, and that became true. And for 10 years, that's exactly what I did. But to go back to this integration, which did take me more than a year, I eventually understood that what the plants were saying was this particular experience in this lifetime had such a deep imprint that the ripples were extending out to all of the timelines. And they were advising me that fundamentally what I needed to do was to heal that experience. And here's one of the things people, with the old pharmaceutical model, if you've got an illness, you take something to suppress the symptoms, then you're better and carry on. Whereas with the holistic model, what we do is we recognize there's something wrong, and we actually go through a whole process, and we go into trust, and we realize that isn't wrong, that's part of my experience. So I'm now going to fast forward another few years, about 2012, 2013, so that's another 6-7 years have gone by, and I'm in the middle of doing all these retreats, and there's one particular retreat I'm hosting and nobody turns up, and it's like, ooh, hey, how about that? That means I can do something completely unexpected, and so I did. So at 10:30 in the morning, there I was hosting a retreat for myself. And I'm not going to say a lot about this retreat, but I am going to say that I had a very intimate experience with the toilet bowl. And I didn't have a purge into the toilet bowl. I had 1.5 doses, which for me is an extraordinarily large amount because minuscule amounts go a very long way for me. But I found myself in the toilet, embracing the toilet bowl and being aware of the porcelain and being aware of my body touching it, and then everything would go into moving colours. And this is my opportunity to do my little broadcast about this. I want to slaughter another sacred cow. There are no hallucinations. Hallucinations don't exist. When people talk about hallucinations, what they mean is they're waking up. They're waking up to what actually is. So it's not a hallucination. In fact, if anything's a hallucination, it's me, the microphone, and the camera, and the room, and the candle. It's far more of a hallucination than what people call hallucinations. So what was happening to me is I was embracing the toilet bowl, and I was aware of all the colours and the forms and the movements, and then everything to do with consensus reality simply evaporated, and I was in the realms, and all of the consensus had gone, and I was completely in the blissful wonderment of all that is. And then an unspecified period of linear time would go by, because of course I just exited linear time. I've been in timelessness, and linear time would come back, and I'd be aware I'd be hugging the toilet bowl. I'd be aware of hugging the toilet bowl, and that would go again, because this is one of the things that brown medicine comes in waves. That's a very useful thing to be aware of. And brown medicine comes in waves. Very significant. So the last thing I want to say about that particular experience was when the consensus has really established itself, and I felt like leaving the toilet bowl. I went into the bedroom, set up the camera, put up the microphone, and I said, this is me having an experience. This is you having an experience. This is us. We are having an experience. And what the brown medicine told me is this is a statement which is always true. I'm having an experience in the brown medicine. I'm having an experience not in any medicine whatsoever. It's always us having an experience. This is actually what life is. We're having an experience. We are a soul having an experience which includes, but is not limited to, a physical body. So the greatest of all the gifts about working with the plant medicines, we realize that actually there is so much more than what we were taught by our caregivers, parents, peers, school teachers, and all the rest. Actually, we are powerful beyond measure. We are multidimensional, iridescent light beings, and it's all a ride, as the famous comedian Bill Hicks likes to say. So I'm wondering what is the next thing that they want me to say. So here I am working with the guides and helpers as per usual. That's like almost enough, but there's something else that wants to come out. So let's see what that's going to be. Okay. Really the point about working with the plant medicines is that epiphanies I had at that point. Because when we understand that this is us having our experiences, it's not just about surrendering and trusting when you're in the ceremony. It's about surrendering and trusting to everything that happens in life. And so one of the biggest jokes of all is, say, how do you make God laugh? Tell him your plans. What they really mean is the way to make God laugh is to allow your rational mind to tell your rational mind's opinions of what your plans are. That's what it really means. So plans, yes. So what happened to me is that I stopped hosting retreats because my mother has reached a point in her life when she needed more assistance from me, and that rapidly turned into Alzheimer's, which then gave me another wonderful opportunity to let go, because it wasn't going to be about me doing all the caregiving, or even me and my partner doing all the caregiving, because she actually very rapidly reached a point where it required a whole team of people to be able to work with her in shifts over a 24-hour period. So can you imagine the amount of letting go that had to happen there? Because I knew, because she'd broadcast the information for years, the only thing she didn't ever want to do is to end up in a home for old people. Bingo. That's exactly what happened. So I had to go through all of that, through the image of perfection and not wanting that to be the case with my mother, and trust. This is me having an experience, this is you having an experience, this is my mum having an experience. And so I had such a powerful and poignant learning in that 18 months as she dropped from 53 kilos to 33 kilos till they wouldn't tell us her weight anymore until she died finally. And literally her body shut down. That's what happened because of the fact that she just wasted away, literally. And so what I was able to see there is that the incredible pain that she was in for the first year of that 18 months from the what people label as an illness called shingles, together with the Alzheimer's itself, everything that she'd not processed in her life, that she'd not ever given herself the time to go into, that people do go into when they work with plant medicines, or with shamans, or with healers, or with counsellors, or with NHS therapists, or whoever it might be, in whatever way. She didn't get to do any of that, so it all got done at the end of her life. Those last 18 months to 2 years, she processed everything. So I got to have this very poignant experience of knowing that I could witness, I could be part of that experience. I couldn't be there all the time, and accept and trust and love. And so that's exactly what happened. So one of my biggest experiences on my journey with plant medicines was not having any plant medicines at all, but literally living and learning the integration from all those retreats. This is me having an experience. This is Mum having an experience. I'm present in her experience. She's present in my experience. That's it. And that's how it goes. And so 4 or 5 months after she passed into spirit, which was literally a year ago, give or take a day or two, then I found myself going even more deeply and intensively into my own personal healing journey. And my view is as follows: there are no illnesses. Illness is a very old-fashioned, very 20th century concept. What's much more appropriate is to realise that there are no illnesses, but what there are experiences. And these experiences can move us on and catalyse transformation. Some of them got the label on them of illness. And then to understand, particularly if you think about viruses, someone gets a virus and they're not able to function normally, and they have symptoms, and either they get over it or they don't. So let's take the first scenario: the person gets a virus and gets over it. What they've had is a discharge. They've discharged a load of toxins from their body. When someone works the plant medicines, they discharge a load of toxins from their body. So a virus and the plant medicines, much of a muchness really. But what about the person that has the virus and then leaves their physical body for good, in other words, dies? Well, this is the real shocker. It simply means that they're ready to embrace the next part of the most magnificent journey of being a human being. Because there's a reason why most religions have put fear into people about suicide. Religions don't want people to commit suicide, because that's missing all the benefits and the value for being in a human form as a true soul as you are. However, it's all about the trust again, because if the outcome of having a particular illness or condition means that you then leave the planet, and this happened to me with my wife who died of cancer in 2005, 16 years ago I had that experience as well, and it was like, it didn't matter what her rational mind thought or what my rational mind thought, it was time for her to go and embrace the next part of the journey. And my sister died in 2012, taking passes out of the oven and collapsing on the kitchen floor. It was the same thing. I might have had opinions, she might have had opinions, Maybe her children had opinions. Maybe her partner had opinions. But the point is, it was her time. When we fully embrace trust, and that's what the journey with the plant medicines is about, we realize it's about every single thing in your life. 2007, head-on collision between me and another vehicle. Hospital, morphine, operation. All part of my journey. And that's really the message of the plant medicines year, a true retreat integration, is to realize that ultimately we don't have control, because we don't know what's going to happen when we set foot out of the door, or even when we set foot down the stairs, or trip over a rug in the living room, whatever it might happen to be. Anything can and may happen at any time. So we trust the process, and we remember that we are souls inhabiting a physical body. And we also remember that when the game is over, when this game is over, the door opens. And oh my goodness me, that's why people take plant medicines. There is nothing to fear beyond this. Nothing at all. This is actually the realm where people get to experience fear in its fullness, being in the physical body. All the anxieties about this and that. You get the physical body, that's all gone. So thank you very much for coming with me on this journey. And I've greatly enjoyed sharing it with you. And I want to thank particularly Kat, because it was watching Kat's podcast with her wonderful guest. It's on Spotify. I'll give you the details at the bottom. That's what made me feel like I wanted to share this with you. Much love to you. Thank you.